Our top story for tonight, Taysom Hill is a tight end. That's the news we've been hearing out of New Orleans camp. It's been the tight ends coach that has been talking about how Taysom Hill will be utilized in the Saints offense this year under new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. And this couldn't be better for fantasy in terms of unlocking a cheat code at the tight end position. Yes, we've seen improvements in the tight end in terms of fantasy over the course of the last year. The emergence of Trey McBride, the emergence of Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce still being relevant, TJ Hawkinson, yes, he may be recovering from an ACL, but he's still very good. Evan Engram is very good, but the way Taysom Hill is being treated in the underdog streets or any other best ball format, if he switches to the position of tight end officially, we're looking at an absolute cheat code. And right now, Taysom Hill is going in the 160s. We're going to talk about the impact of Taysom Hill as a tight end and other underreported news items from OTAs right after this. All right, I did mention in the opener about Taysom Hill, but before we get into a few more details regarding Taysom Hill, I want to make sure you guys are checking out playerprofiler.com/news. You'll be able to see all of these news updates and more in terms of videos, in terms of blurbs, fantasy advice, all of that. Playerprofiler.com/news, and just save that site on your mobile device. Click add to bookmark, put it on your homepage, and it's scrolls very easily on your mobile device. So make sure you guys are checking that out. We update it every day. Whenever news breaks, we've got some of the best content creators in the business filling up the news stream, and you'll get blurbs like this to give you an edge over your league mates in terms of fantasy advice. So make sure you guys are checking out that. My name is Bradley Stalder. You can follow me on the X Machine at FF Stalder. I'm the news director, and so all of these news items will go through me. Oftentimes, I'm the one who's posting in our Discord. Make sure you guys are going to playerprofiler.com, going to the Discord, and you can see the live discussion that happens in terms of how the news is being filtered through. Sometimes I will post. Sometimes some of our content creators will bring in news items that they find, and they'll write about. Some of them will create videos. So I want you to be on the in. Sometimes these news items break before you get notifications on your phone. So check it out. It's really important for y'all to be having this edge, especially in the off season when news sometimes feels a little slow, but there's always these undercurrents of how the depth charts are filling out and where certain players are in terms of jockeying for starting position. And that's what we're talking about here with Taysom Hill. Hill is being deployed as a tight end and has also spent some time in the running back room. He has not spent time as a quarterback. Last year, there was some controversy in the fantasy community about Taysom Hill being on the quarterback depth chart. So he was switched from tight end to the quarterback position, which nerfed most of his fantasy value. There were only really a couple weeks where he was fantasy relevant, even though he was a quarterback. And so that would have helped us a lot more in terms of tight end value. But that's why we want to be in on this. And I was talking about this as a possibility even before this news came out. You should have been drafting Taysom Hill in any format where he is a tight end technically, or where he could switch. So right now, based on what I understand, what I've looked at Drafters Fantasy, they have him listed as a tight end. DraftKings has Taysom Hill listed as a tight end, and FFPC has him listed as a quarterback. But we've seen FFPC shift in the offseason from Taysom Hill being a quarterback to being a tight end. And so we want to be in on the Taysom Hill tight end train. We want to be ahead of that switch. And now is the time to be drafting Taysom Hill, because last year Taysom Hill was in the quarterback 40s in terms of fantasy points per game. He was averaging about 8 fantasy points per game in half-point scoring. but 8 points per game and half point scoring puts him at tight end 12. Tight end 12. And so you're getting a back end tight end 1 with extreme upside. We're talking 20 plus points as ceiling types of games because of the rushing, because of the goal line, that all of that is a possibility. The Saints aren't going to use Alvin Kamara too often in the goal line scenarios. He's an older running back who's not built for it. And you've got Kendry Miller and you've got Jamal Williams, but also Taysom Hill gives another look, and he's been working in the backfield as a running back, but also as the tight ends coach has spoken numerous times about Taysom Hill's role this offseason, and I'm very excited about it. Yeah, last year there was this big fiasco about the switch in terms of what are the platforms going to do. So this is something you want to be ahead of the curve in terms of what is Taysom Hill and how is he going to contribute for you for fantasy. You're like, well, if he's tight end 12, there's not going to be really much of a there is a major difference. Taysom Hill right now is going in the 160s to 180s on most fantasy platforms. But right now, but if he ends up being a tight end 12 or tight end 15, he should be going in the 110s, right? He should be going in the 100s. That's where he should be valued. We're talking, 5, 6, 7 rounds of ADP value that we could see absolutely vault. And you're getting him at that type of discount. Then you can also focus on, yes, you want to take an elite tight end? Great, be my guest. But you can fill out the rest of your flex positions and then say, I'm going to take Taysom Hill later. And this is a massive upside best ball play. So we'll monitor as it goes on this offseason. But the way things are trending, we want to be ahead of this curve. This is a very easy curve to get ahead of. And we want to be getting this massive edge in terms of a onesie position where we don't see massive spike weeks very often from the tight ends, but we have seen it from Taysom Hill. Now, he is 34 years old, and the coaches have come out and said, we acknowledge how old Taysom Hill is, but he's still dynamic and he's still part of our offense, and we're going to use him in a lot of different formations. I expect a lot of manufactured and high-value touches in 2024 for Taysom Hill, so we need to be in on Taysom Hill in terms of fantasy. This is something actionable. We need to make it happen. And it's also NFL newsworthy, right? He's not going to be on the quarterback depth chart. He's going to be on the tight end depth chart. And the only other tight end of note in New Orleans is a notable one, and also a tight end that's going way too late, Juwan Johnson, a big-bodied former wide receiver turned tight end who's athletic and caught touchdowns. Yes, he's not a big yardage guy, but we've seen spike weeks from him too, and he's going in the 160s, almost around where Taysom Hill is going. So you can get both New Orleans tight ends who play kind of different positions and are acting independent of each other as a good value. So Juwan Johnson, an undervalued tight end. He's got really no other competition in New Orleans. Jimmy Graham is going to be gone, and he caught touchdowns, so we can peg those for Juwan Johnson maybe, but really, I think these New Orleans Saints tight ends are extremely undervalued, and they're easy backdoor stacks with you can get Jacoby Myers really late. You can get, Michael Mayer if you want to pivot off of Brock Bowers. You can get Michael Mayer late. You can get Trey Tucker late. You can get those New Orleans Vegas stacks if you are in the best ball streets. So consider going after Taysom Hill. It's extremely compelling what Hill has been able to do over the last few years in terms of accessing massive ceiling because of his versatility and the manufactured touches and, frankly, his dynamism. Like, he's 34, but he's been in his 30s the last 4 years. So, no, we're not worried about his age until we actually see him slow down in terms of usage or manufactured touches. And if this is the year to be wrong about Taysom Hill, we're going to keep leaning into the process of what we've seen from him in his 30s anyways, and in the Saints offense, and in the role of utility explosion player. So we're going to talk about a few more really important and underreported OTA notes right after this.
Now, I know many of you are looking for a secret weapon for your Dynasty League, and I have it. It's called the Dynasty Dominator app. You go to the App Store, go to Google Play. It's right there. It's $5 to download, and then every year it's $5 to load the next incoming class of rookies. You can add superflex, add tight end premium. It's incredible because it allows you to look up players. It allows you to vote on whether a player is a buy, hold, or sell, and then see the market sentiment on that player. And you can compare their lifetime value rating from PlayerProfiler to their Dynasty ADP at the FFPC, all in the price lookup tool. And beyond that, we have a trade analyzer, so you'll never lose another Dynasty trade again. And in our settings, you can set this is a win now team, this is a rebuilding team, and then we let you compare players. Look at their metrics side by side, prospect metrics, NFL metrics. It's all there. It's $5 in the App Store. There's some add-ons for Superflex and to buy the upcoming rookie class. Every year, you're going to spend $5 on this thing, and it's going to be well worth it.
That's right. It's going to be well worth it for you to get the Dynasty Dominator app. I use it often to make sure that my player values are pretty aligned. You know, I have my own player takes, but it's also important to understand how the market is probably going to react. And this helps me adjust a little bit in terms of making sure I get the deal done that I want to. And so the Dynasty Dominator app is one way to use that and never lose a Dynasty trade again. Speaking of Dynasty possibility of explosion, there are big expectations in year 3 for Jalen Tolbert, right? Michael Gallup is gone. He signed with the Vegas Raiders, a 1-year deal, and the Dallas Cowboys only addressed the wide receiver position with Ryan Flournoy. Now, Jason Allwine at JFootballWine loves Ryan Flournoy. I don't mind him, but Jalen Tolbert was drafted 88th overall just a couple of years ago, and it's just Brandon Cooks ahead of Tolbert in terms of the depth chart. Now, what's very interesting is that Brandon Cooks noted Jalen Tolbert's growth when he recently said he's, quote, going to crush it this year. So I still expect that CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks are going to be the top wide receiver receiving options. I think that Jake Ferguson is also going to be a very fantasy useful piece. Look, we don't like Jake Ferguson's athleticism. You know, maybe he's Dalton Schultz 2.0, but we've seen Dalton Schultz be fantasy relevant for some games. And in the opportunity that exists in Dallas, Jake Ferguson, definitely an interesting possibility. If you want to take some late dart throws on Jalen Tolbert, I don't mind it. He was an athletic player coming out of Southern Alabama. He had 22 catches for 268 yards and 2 touchdowns on 36 targets over 17 games last year. So not a lot of data to go off of, but he is worth a late round flyer if you've got some Dallas or you've got some Philly in your week 17 stacks and correlations. So consider Jalen Tolbert because of how he could peg himself as the wide receiver 3. We really haven't seen a rookie step up in the Dallas wide receiver offense since CeeDee Lamb, and then before that, Michael Gallup. And even in their respective seasons, like CeeDee had a good rookie season, but Michael Gallup didn't do much his rookie year. You know, he had his big explosion year in year 2, and then he ends up getting injured. But Jalen Tolbert has this opportunity now in year 3, and we shouldn't completely write him off. But the fact that he was not able to push out an aging Brandon Cooks, certainly a head scratcher. And also, we have organizational concerns about the Dallas Cowboys. This offseason, Jerry Jones said he was going to go all in. The Cowboys are going to go all in. And what do? Nothing before the NFL draft. And then they don't do much during the NFL draft to address the offense. And then they signed Ezekiel Elliott. Yes, all in. No, that's the problem, is that there are organizational concerns, or at least a disconnect between what Jerry Jones is saying and how the team is actually being managed. And I wonder if the bringing in of analytics is going to be, you know, something that we need to consider. That's reportedly the reason why the Dallas Cowboys did not draft a running back in April's draft was because of the analytics telling the team that they shouldn't be drafting a running back at certain points in the draft based on the tiers of who's available. So the positional value is something that we want to consider, and perhaps the analytics value, people are saying, hey, let's at least give Jalen Tolbert an opportunity to be the wide receiver 3. He's not completely written off yet. So let's monitor this situation for now. He's worth the dart throw given the opportunity, possibility in Dallas. But also you have to understand that he was not good his rookie year and his sophomore year. So our concerns are he's just going to bust. He's going to be a round 3 bust. These happen all the time. We saw it happen with, for instance, Amari Rodgers a couple years ago. We've just seen these wide receivers just not produce after a couple years, and they get written off. But perhaps the opportunity is all Jalen Tolbert needs to be effective. So consider him as a late round dart throw, but this is not a high confidence pick. This is there's opportunity, but is he going to do a lot with it? We've got concerns. Maybe it's Ryan Flournoy who can step up instead. Jason would love that as the wide receiver 3. Okay. Another very interesting hype piece, and these hype pieces keep coming from Baltimore. I don't understand it. Rashad Bateman hype pieces, it seems every single day out of Baltimore. The Ravens just continue to tell us that they want Rashad Bateman to be the answer. The Ravens let Odell Beckham Jr. go, right? They didn't address the wide receiver position in the offseason. It's Rashad Bateman, it's Zay Flowers, it's Mark Andrews, and then in the running back, it's Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. The hype for Rashad Bateman continues this offseason. Look, after hearing John Harbaugh talking about how Bateman looks great and continues to shine in offseason activities, even his teammates, even Bateman's teammates are hyping him up. Mark Andrews says he looks incredible. He looks as put together as he's ever been. It's going to be a big year for Rashad Bateman. I'm calling it now. This was Mark Andrews' quote. Bateman has had his challenges because he was a barely 6-foot wide receiver out of Minnesota, first round draft capital. He had been injured over the last couple of years, and that's been the big inhibitor. I mean, looking at Rashad Bateman's season, we thought from rookie year to sophomore year, we were going to see a big jump. But unfortunately, due to the injuries, right, he's been extremely limited. From in 2021 and 2022, he played a combined 18 games. And last year, even though Bateman played 16 games, wide receiver 88 in terms of fantasy points per game. And that the existence of Odell Beckham hurt, Zay Flowers hurt. But Bateman's target rate in 2021, his rookie year, was 20%, a 16% target share. In 2022, in those 6 games, a 25.5% target rate, an 18% target share. So he has the possibility of being more of like a back end wide receiver 3 as his ceiling, given the target rate that he's getting, and also the team he's on. We know what the Baltimore Ravens are in terms of an offense, and that's run first. They're going to throttle the ball with Derrick Henry. And also, if you're interested in getting Derrick Henry's backup, I think the most direct backup right now is Justice Hill. We look at the other 2 running backs who are on the team, and it's Rasheen Ali, who was just drafted but has a core muscle injury he's been working back from that cost him during the combine process. And then we also have Keaton Mitchell, who, yes, he averaged an ungodly 7-something yards per carry before he tore his ACL at the end of the season. And it was Justice Hill who was holding down the fort. Gus Edwards is gone. J.K. Dobbins is gone. I think Justice Hill is the most valuable running back asset, and he's being drafted in the last rounds of your fantasy drafts. We want that guy on a run-heavy team who's the direct handcuff to Derrick Henry. I don't think Justice Hill is going to take anything away from Henry, but Justice Hill right now is pegging as the running back too, and the coaches love Justice Hill. He was the exact quote before the NFL Combine was Justice Hill is the unsung hero. So in terms of offense, it'll be Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, and then Rashad Bateman, who's probably at best a wide receiver 36 to 48 range. That's probably the ceiling for Bateman. And when we look at what he's done in terms of fantasy points per game, right, we saw at best 8.9 PPR fantasy points per game. That's not going to work in terms of delivering for us for fantasy. So Rashad Bateman, the player that we need to slow the roll. I understand there's a lot of hype, but we have to understand where the ceiling is, and that's in the wide receiver 30s to 40s for Rashad Bateman. We also have to talk about the Nico Collins extension, because this has ramifications beyond just, he's a top 20 dynasty wide receiver, which is true. One of the big issues in terms of long-term commitment in our dynasty leagues is Nico Collins going to get an extension? Because at this point, before 48 hours ago, the answer was no. Nico Collins is going into the last year of his deal. And instead, now Collins has a 3-year extension. So he's going to be tied to CJ Stroud for 4 more years, 2024, 5, 6, and 7. Fantastic. And what did Nico Collins do last year? He only crushed in every opportunity. He was let me pull it up. The best ball value rating, Nico Collins was wide receiver 7 in best ball value rating last year. And you're saying, well, Tank Dell was out for a little bit. Look, he did some of that damage with Tank Dell in. And if any of those wide receivers go out, which we've seen Tank Dell not hold up for the whole season, he's also small of stature. Stephon Diggs is an older wide receiver who really fell off massively. The organizational confidence with Nico Collins is clear. They gave him $52 million guaranteed extension, $72 million in the contract, 52 of that guaranteed. That's phenomenal commitment in terms of an organization and pushing the chips in on this is the player that we not only want for this year. Stephon Diggs falls in that category. We want Stephon Diggs just for this year. Nico Collins, we want for long term. We want for the next 4 years. And so Collins, a player who I said was wide receiver 7 in terms of best ball value rating, wide receiver 7 in fantasy points per game last year, almost 1,300 yards, 80 receptions, 8 touchdowns. Some of the efficiency metrics were beautiful. 2nd in yards per route run, 2nd in formation yards, formation adjusted yards per route run, 3rd in yards per target. He was a downfield menace and a big body wide receiver, 6'4", 215. He needed a couple years to get going, and then he gets the quarterback upgrade that he sorely needed to explode. So Nico Collins, a player, wide receiver 2 in terms of target premium, wide receiver 4 in terms of production premium, number 5 in EPA, number 2 in quarterback rating per target, and 4th in fantasy points per route. Just gorgeous. And number 1 in terms of fantasy points per target versus man. So Nico Collins wins downfields. He wins against man coverage. Remember, this is a player who was very athletic coming out of U of M. He wasn't a top tier prospect. There were questions about him. I had my questions about him. I was out on him for last year. I was very suspect of this Houston offense. CJ Stroud, though, put it together and proved me and many other people wrong. Nico Collins, very athletic wide receiver, wins downfield, big bodied, and maybe the efficiency metrics go down just a little bit. But this is a player who earned a respectable 23% target share and a 27% target rate. He's going to get targeted big down the field. And we want to be drafting him in the second round of our fantasy drafts, in the third rounds of our fantasy drafts. I've seen him fall because there's been concerns. Oh, Tank Dell is there, Stephon Diggs. It's very achievable to get Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and CJ Stroud all on your fantasy team. I've done it myself in the best ball streets. So make sure you are drafting Nico Collins because he is the best bet to be the best wide receiver of the three. And that's what the market is saying about him as well. But the efficiency metrics speak very strongly about what type of player Nico Collins is and why we should be bullish on Nico Collins. The last bit that I want to mention is Jameson Williams. Dan Campbell tells the truth. That's what we know from Coach Speak Index. If you go to Coach Speak Index on Twitter and you look up Dan Campbell, he tells the truth about his players. He has one of the higher reliability ratings among head coaches. And Dan Campbell said Jameson Williams is the most improved player in OTAs from last year. We'll take his word for it. And the Detroit Lions have acted like it. We need to listen to the actions of the Lions and the words of Dan Campbell. If Jameson Williams is the most improved and he's, quote, a man on a mission, and the Lions have said, you know what, we haven't addressed the wide receiver room in the draft, and we let Josh Reynolds go, and it's just Khalif Raymond there, it's going to be Amon-Ra, it's going to be Laporta, and it's going to be Jameson Williams. Now, will Williams get a 25% target share? I don't think so. I think he's going to be more Will Fuller in terms of an 18 to 22% target share, a couple manufactured touches, probably going to be close to that 18 to 20 range. But Jameson Williams has the extreme speed to explode. And if Dan Campbell is identifying this as the most improved player on the team, look out, because he is a player that we want to be in on, because Dan Campbell knows what he's talking about. Like, if he believes that he's most improved, he's going to say, Jared Goff, throw it to Jameson Williams. Jared Goff, like, let's get Jameson Williams a target in space. Let's get him the ball. Amon-Ra, you can be Mr. Reliable. We're happy with that. Sam Laporta, you can win the middle of the field. Jameson Williams, we're going to have you be more than a field stretcher or more than a decoy. We're going to get the ball to you. And so Jameson Williams is a player that is going far too cheap for what his ceiling could be in the best ball streets, is going in the back end of the 40s among wide receivers. So we want to be in on Jameson Williams, man on a mission. We are here for it. Buy low on Jameson Williams. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in to Player Profiler today. I'm Bradley Stalder. You can follow me on Twitter at FFStalder. Make sure you are going to playerprofiler.com/news to get the most up-to-date news from your favorite Player Profiler content creators. Until next time, good luck in fantasy football streets, everybody.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com. Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.